My name is Isabella Rose Martinez, and I'm 31 years old. For most of my life, I believed family meant unconditional love. I was wrong. It happened at my cousin Sophia's wedding reception. The grand ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and white roses, filled with the sound of clinking champagne glasses and gentle laughter. I stood near the chocolate fountain in my emerald green bridesmaid dress, watching everyone celebrate love and new beginnings. Little did I know, my world was about to explode into fragments. Mom approached me with that look, the one that made my chest tighten and my palms sweat. Her designer stilettos clicked against the polished marble like a countdown to disaster. Dad followed behind her, his face already flushed from too much wine. "Isabella, we need to have a conversation," Mom said, her voice cutting through the wedding music like a blade. Uncle Miguel and Aunt Carmen drifted over, along with several family friends. I thought they were just being social, but the circle forming around me felt more like a noose tightening. "What's going on?" I asked, forcing my brightest smile. Mom's lips curved into something cold and sharp. "We've been discussing your circumstances." My heart started hammering against my ribs. "What circumstances?" "Your complete lack of direction. Your inability to maintain any meaningful relationships. Your pathetic dependence on us." Each word landed like a physical blow. The conversations around us began to fade. People were turning to stare. "Mom, please." "Not here, not today," I whispered, glancing around at the growing audience of curious faces. But she wasn't finished. Her dark eyes, the same ones I'd inherited, turned ice cold. "You know what, Isabella? I'm exhausted from pretending. You're the most useless daughter we have. Look at your sister, married, accomplished, completely independent. And then there's you." The words hung in the perfumed air like toxic smoke. Everyone around us fell dead silent. I could feel their shocked stares burning holes in my skin. My cousin Sophia, radiant in her flowing white gown, had stopped mid-laugh across the room. The string quartet played on, completely oblivious to the emotional carnage unfolding near the dessert table. Something deep inside me finally snapped. 31 years of trying to be perfect enough, trying to earn their approval, trying to be the daughter they wanted, all of it crumbled in that single moment. I stood up straighter, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me like cool water. When I spoke, my voice was steady and crystal clear. "Then stop calling me when you need money." Mom's face collapsed like a house of cards. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the shock that washed over her features. Dad's mouth opened and closed like he was drowning in air. The silence was absolutely deafening. I swear, it felt like every single person in that ballroom stopped breathing. Uncle Miguel cleared his throat awkwardly. Aunt Carmen suddenly found her champagne flute fascinating. The family friends who had gathered to witness the show now looked like they wanted to sink through the floor. But I wasn't finished. Years of buried hurt came pouring out like water through a broken dam. "You want to talk about useless? Let's discuss who paid for Sophia's wedding flowers when you came up short. Who covered Dad's medical bills when the insurance denied the claims? Who's been your personal ATM for the past 5 years while you told everyone else how ashamed you were of me?" If you've ever felt like you weren't good enough for your own family, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories of family drama and healing. You won't believe what happens next. Mom's designer clutch slipped from her trembling fingers and hit the marble floor with a loud crash. The sound echoed through the silence like thunder. "Isabella, you're causing a scene," Dad finally managed to whisper. "No, Dad. You caused the scene." I'm just ending it. I looked around at the faces staring back at me, some horrified, some sympathetic, some hungry for more drama. But for the first time in my entire life, I didn't care what any of them thought. Enjoy the rest of the celebration, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. I'm going home. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of my sister Valentina across the room. She stood frozen beside the towering wedding cake, her picture-perfect life suddenly looking less perfect. Our eyes met for just a heartbeat, and I saw something there I'd never seen before, pure guilt. The walk to the exit felt like walking through molasses. My heels echoed in the sudden quiet, and I could feel every single eye in that ballroom tracking my retreat. But with each step, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Freedom. I was almost to the ornate double doors when I heard Mom's voice, shaky and desperate, calling my name. But I didn't turn around. For once in my life, I kept walking forward. Outside in the cool evening air, I fumbled for my phone with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. As I waited for my rideshare, I realized something terrifying. I had just destroyed my entire family relationship in front of 75 people. But here's what scared me even more, I didn't regret it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, "We need to talk. There are things about your family you don't know. Meet me at Blue Moon Cafe tomorrow at 2 p.m. Trust me." Who was A? And what could they possibly know about my family that I didn't? As my car pulled up, I had no idea that this was just the beginning. The real family secrets were about to come crashing down around me like an avalanche. The next morning, I woke up in my tiny downtown apartment with a pounding headache and a phone full of missed calls. 27 from Mom, 18 from Dad, and surprisingly, 14 from Valentina, my perfect sister who usually acted like I was invisible unless she needed something. I made coffee with trembling hands and tried to piece together the emotional wreckage from the night before. Had I really exposed my parents in front of half the extended family? The memory felt surreal, like watching someone else's nightmare unfold in slow motion. Growing up, I was always Valentina's shadow. She was 3 years older, valedictorian, homecoming queen, full scholarship to Stanford. I was the kid who got A's and B's, played varsity tennis, and went to the local university. Not terrible, but not Valentina. The phone rang again. Mom's name lit up the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Instead, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my computer, trying to understand how we'd gotten to this point. There's one from my 9th birthday, me blowing out candles while Valentina stood behind me, her smile looking forced and brittle. Even then, there was something wrong with our family dynamic, but I was too young to understand it. The patterns started early. When Valentina made student body president, they threw her a celebration dinner. When I won the regional tennis championship, they said, "That's nice, honey." When she got engaged to her medical school boyfriend, they threw an engagement party. When I brought home my ex-boyfriend Connor, they asked when I was going to start taking life seriously. Everything I accomplished was measured against Valentina's achievements. Every conversation began with, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Every family gathering became a showcase of her successes and my failures. But here's the twist that really cut deep: I was always the one they turned to when crisis hit. When Dad had his stroke 2 years ago, guess who took unpaid leave from work to manage his rehabilitation? When Mom's catering business was drowning in debt, who emptied their emergency fund to keep it afloat? When Valentina's perfect marriage hit turbulence and she needed expensive couples therapy, who quietly paid for the sessions? Me. Always me. The dependable daughter. The responsible daughter. The useful daughter, until last night, apparently. My laptop chimed with a Facebook message from Sophia, yesterday's bride. Isabella, I'm so sorry about what happened. Are you okay? Mom and Dad looked completely shattered after you left. Valentina locked herself in the bridal suite bathroom and wouldn't come out for 2 hours. I don't understand what's happening with your family, but that wasn't right. I stared at the message. Valentina locked herself in a bathroom and cried? Valentina never showed vulnerability, especially not over me. Another message appeared, this one from my cousin Diego. Holy hell, Bella, that was intense. But honestly, someone needed to call them out. The way they talk about you when you're not around is seriously messed up. Wait. What? I typed back immediately, what do you mean, when I'm not around? The typing dots appeared and disappeared several times before his response came, maybe we should meet up. There's stuff you need to hear. My hands were shaking again. I checked the time, 1:15 p.m. The mysterious A wanted to meet me at Blue Moon Cafe in 45 minutes. Diego's revelation could wait. I threw on black jeans and a burgundy sweater, grabbed my purse, and headed out into the overcast afternoon. Portland was doing its typical November thing, drizzling just enough to make everything gray and depressing. Blue Moon Cafe was one of those artsy coffee shops with mismatched furniture and baristas covered in tattoos. I ordered a cappuccino and found a corner table, my nerves stretched tighter than guitar strings. At exactly 2 p.m., someone slid into the chair across from me. It was Connor. My ex-boyfriend Connor, whom I hadn't seen in 18 months. Connor, whom my parents had barely tolerated. Connor, who knew all my family's secrets because he'd been around during some of our ugliest fights. Hello, Isabella, he said quietly. His sandy hair was longer now, and he wore a wedding band I tried not to notice. You're How did you even get my number? I never deleted your contact. He shifted uncomfortably. I heard about last night. My sister was at the wedding. So you came to rub it in? To tell me you warned me about my family? No. His green eyes were serious, the same ones that used to make me feel safe and understood. I came to tell you the truth about why your parents really treat you the way they do. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. What are you talking about? Connor pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph. It was old, grainy, obviously taken from a distance. It showed my mother. Maybe 20 years younger, coming out of a medical building with a man who definitely wasn't my father. I took this when I was working for that investigation company, remember? Your mom hired me to follow your dad because she suspected he was having an affair. I remembered. Connor had worked for a private investigation firm for about 8 months during college. It's where he developed his suspicious nature and trust issues, one of the many reasons we didn't work out. But she wasn't the victim, Isabella. She was the one cheating. The coffee shop seemed to spin around me. That's impossible. Mom would never. With Dr. Ramirez. Valentina's childhood pediatrician. The words hit me like a physical assault. Dr. Ramirez had been Valentina's doctor since birth, had always been unusually close to our family. Too close, apparently. The timing adds up, Connor continued gently. Valentina was born in April. If your mom got pregnant in July the year before. I couldn't catch my breath. You're saying Valentina isn't Dad's daughter? I'm saying your parents have been living a lie for over 30 years. And you've been paying the emotional price for their guilt. The ambient noise of the cafe faded to a distant buzz. Everything suddenly made horrible, perfect sense. Why Valentina was treated like royalty while I was held to impossible standards. Why every achievement of mine was dismissed while hers were celebrated. Why I was the one they leaned on when they needed something, but never the one they turned to with affection. I wasn't competing with my sister. I was competing with their shame. "There's more," Connor said, and I wanted to scream at him to stop, that I couldn't handle more revelations. But he kept talking. "Your dad knows. He's always known. I saw them arguing about it once. Remember that night you and I came home early from dinner and they were screaming in the kitchen?" I remembered. They'd gone silent when we walked in, both their faces red and swollen from crying. They claimed it was about financial stress, but their accounts had been healthy. They've been keeping the secret together, but channeling their guilt and resentment toward you. You're the living reminder of what their marriage really is, Isabella. You're the inconvenient truth. My phone buzzed with another call from Valentina. This time, I answered. "Isabella? Thank God. Where are you? We need to talk immediately." "Do we?" My voice sounded foreign, even to me. "About what, Valentina?" "About how you're not actually my sister." The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, "How did you find out?" The confirmation hit me like a sledgehammer. Connor reached across the table and touched my hand, but I pulled away. I couldn't handle anyone's comfort right now. "So it's true?" "Isabella, please. Let me explain. It's not what you think." "It's not what I think?" "What I think is that my entire family has been lying to me for 31 years while treating me like garbage because of their guilt over your real parentage. That's not, we didn't mean." "Save it." I hung up. Connor was watching me with those careful green eyes. "I'm sorry. I know this is overwhelming. Why now? Why tell me this now?" "Because last night proved you're finished being their emotional punching bag. I thought you deserved to understand why you never stood a chance with them in the first place." I sat there in that cafe, surrounded by the ordinary sounds of ordinary people living ordinary lives, and realized my entire existence had been built on a foundation of lies and guilt. But there was something Connor wasn't telling me. I could see it in the way he kept glancing at his phone, the way his wedding ring caught the light as his hands fidgeted nervously. "What else?" I asked. "What do you mean?" "There's something else. I can tell. Just say it." He hesitated, then pulled up another photo on his phone. This one was recent, taken outside a downtown law office. It showed my parents, Valentina, and her husband Nathan all walking in together. They met with an estate planning attorney last week. "Diego saw them and texted me because he knows how they've been treating you." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of estate planning?" "The kind that helps people write wills, Isabella. And establish trusts." The implication hit me like freezing water. While I'd been financially supporting them for years, they were systematically cutting me out of their future. As I stared at that photo, one more puzzle piece clicked into place. Last month, when I'd given them money for the catering equipment, Valentina had been there. She'd been unusually quiet, wouldn't meet my eyes. She'd known. They all knew what they were planning. I wasn't just the family disappointment. I was the family ATM they were planning to permanently close. I drove home from the cafe in a daze, Connor's revelation spinning in my head like a broken carousel. 24 hours ago, I thought my biggest problem was being the family disappointment. Now I discovered I wasn't even really part of the family I'd been disappointing. My apartment felt different when I walked in, smaller, colder, like it was reflecting the emptiness growing inside my chest. I poured a glass of wine even though it was barely 5 p.m. and called Diego. Finally, he answered immediately. "I've been waiting for you to call back." Connor told me about Valentina. About the affair. The words felt like glass in my mouth. "How long have you known?" "Honestly? I suspected something in high school. Valentina looks nothing like Uncle Luis, and she's always been treated completely differently than you. But I thought maybe I was paranoid until... Until what?" "Until I overheard Mom and Aunt Rosa talking at Easter last year. They thought everyone was outside with the kids, but I came back in for more dessert. They were discussing how guilty Uncle Luis and Aunt Patricia felt about the whole situation." I took a large gulp of wine. "What exactly did they say?" "That it wasn't fair to you, how they'd been handling things. That you deserved better, but they were trapped by the lie at this point. And then Mom said something that made my skin crawl." I waited, not sure I wanted to hear more. "She said maybe it would be better when you weren't in the picture anymore." The wine turned to poison in my stomach. What did she mean by that? "I don't know, Isabella." But 4 days later, Valentina started calling around to extended family asking questions about your relationship with Mom and Dad. Like she was testing the waters to see how people would react if something happened between you guys. I set down my wine with trembling hands. "Diego, I need complete honesty. What has the family been saying about me behind my back?" There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing deeply, gathering courage. "They call you the family bank. Mom jokes that you're like a trained dog, they snap their fingers and you come running with your checkbook. Aunt Rosa said you were pitiful for being so desperate for their love that you'd pay for it." Each word was a dagger between my ribs. "What else?" "Valentina told everyone at Christmas that you were getting too clingy and that they were going to have to establish firmer boundaries with you. She said you were making them uncomfortable with your desperation." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. My desperation. Right. The desperation of paying for Dad's stroke therapy and Mom's business inventory. "There's something else, Isabella. About the will." "I already know." Connor showed me the photo of them at the attorney's office. "No, it's bigger than that. Nathan, Valentina's husband, works for the same law firm. He's been advising them on how to legally protect their assets from what they call potential family litigation." The room started tilting. "They think I'd sue them?" "They're preparing for every possibility. Including making sure that if you ever tried to challenge Valentina's legal status as their daughter, you'd have no grounds because they've been treating her as their biological child for over 3 decades. My phone buzzed with a text from Valentina. "Please call me back. There's so much you don't understand." I showed Diego the message. "Don't," he said immediately. "Not yet. You need more information first." "What do you mean?" "Meet me at O'Malley's pub in an hour. There's someone you need to meet." "Who?" "Someone who knew your parents before you were born. Someone who can tell you the complete story." An hour later, I sat in a dark booth at O'Malley's, nursing another glass of wine and wondering how many more revelations I could survive in one day. Diego slid in across from me, followed by a woman I didn't recognize at first. Then I realized it was Mrs. Chin, our former neighbor from when I was growing up. She looked older, more weathered, but her sharp black eyes were exactly the same. "Hello, Isabella," she said gently. "Diego told me what happened at the wedding. And what you discovered today." "Mrs. Chin? I haven't seen you since your parents moved you all away from Elm Street when you were 14. Right after I confronted your mother about what I'd been witnessing." My heart was racing again. "What did you witness?" She glanced at Diego, who nodded encouragingly. "The affair, sweetheart. I saw it happening for months. But that's not the worst part." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I also saw what happened after your parents discovered Valentina wasn't Luis's biological child." "What do you mean?" "They didn't find out when she was born, Isabella. They found out when she was 13, when she needed emergency surgery for a ruptured appendix and they had to do blood work." The timeline crashed over me like a tidal wave. Valentina was 13 when I was 10. That was the year everything shifted in our house. The year they suddenly started comparing me to her constantly. The year I went from being their little girl to being their burden. They knew she wasn't his, but they'd been treating her like a princess her whole life. They couldn't suddenly change their behavior toward her without everyone asking questions. So instead, they started treating me like trash to balance it out, I finished. Mrs. Chin nodded sadly. "Your father was devastated. Not just about the affair, but about losing the daughter he'd adored for 13 years. And your mother was drowning in guilt. They directed all that pain toward criticism of you. But why me? Why not just, I don't know, family counseling or something? Because you looked like your father, Isabella. Every time they saw you, you were a reminder of what their marriage had become. Valentina looked like Dr. Ramirez, but you were Luis's mirror image. I thought about all those times Dad had looked at me strangely, all those moments when he'd start to hug me and then pull away. All the times Mom had snapped at me for things Valentina did equally. There's more," Mrs. Chin continued. "After the blood work incident, your parents went to counseling. But not the kind you'd expect." Diego pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of a business card. "I found this in your mom's old recipe box when I helped her organize the kitchen last month." The card read, "Dr. Elena Vasquez, Family Financial Planning and Asset Protection." They didn't go to a marriage counselor, Isabella. They went to a financial advisor who specialized in protecting assets from family disputes. They've been planning for this scenario for 18 years. The puzzle pieces were falling into place with nauseating clarity. Every loan I'd given them, every time I'd helped financially, I'd been signing informal agreements. Documentation that could be used to show I was a creditor, not a family member with inheritance rights. "The catering business your mom owns? It's in Valentina's name. The house? Joint ownership with Valentina. Your father's retirement accounts? Valentina is the primary beneficiary." I felt like I was suffocating. "They've been stealing from me to give to her." "Not stealing," Diego said quietly. "Planning. They've been systematically transferring assets to protect them from you while making sure you felt obligated to keep providing them money." Mrs. Chin reached across the table and took my hand. "Sweetheart, I tried to intervene when you were younger. I called Child Protective Services about the emotional abuse I witnessed. But you children always appeared clean and fed, and your parents were clever enough to be careful around mandatory reporters. You tried to help me? I tried. But the system isn't designed to protect children from emotional manipulation and financial exploitation. Especially when the parents are as intelligent as yours. My phone rang. Mom's number again. This time, I answered on speakerphone. Isabella, darling, where are you? We've been worried out of our minds. The false sweetness in her voice made me want to vomit. Have you been? Of course. Last night was just a misunderstanding. You know how stressful weddings can be. Why don't you come home for dinner? I'll make your favorite enchiladas. Diego and Mrs. Chen exchanged glances across the table. Mom, I have a question for you. Of course, Mija. Anything. Is Valentina my biological sister? The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, what kind of question is that? Of course she is. You're both my daughters. That's not what I asked. Another pause. Then, in a voice I'd never heard from her before, cold and calculating, Isabella, I think you need professional help. This paranoid thinking isn't healthy. And there it was. The gaslighting I'd been experiencing my entire life, laid completely bare. I'm not paranoid, Mom. I'm informed. Informed by whom? That boy Connor? You can't trust anything he says, Isabella. He was always jealous of our family. Diego was shaking his head across the table, mouthing, "Don't believe her." I'm going to ask you one final time. Is Luis Valentina's biological father? I'm not dignifying that with a response. Come home, Isabella. We need to discuss getting you professional help. The manipulation was so blatant it was almost impressive. Here's what we're going to discuss, Mom. You're going to pay back every penny I've given you over the years. With interest. And you're going to explain to the family why you've been lying about Valentina's parentage while using me as your personal bank account. Isabella, you're being hysterical. And if you don't, I'm going to tell everyone the truth. Including Dr. Ramirez's wife. The line went dead. Diego was staring at me with admiration. Holy shit, Isabella. You actually did it. But Mrs. Chen looked worried. Sweetheart, you need to be careful. People with this much to hide can become dangerous when they're cornered. As if to prove her point, my phone immediately started buzzing with calls from Valentina, Dad, and several numbers I didn't recognize. I turned off my phone and looked at my unlikely allies across the table. What do I do now? Mrs. Chen smiled grimly. Now, dear, you get yourself an attorney. Because this is about to become very ugly. 3 days after I confronted Mom on the phone, I sat in the office of Margaret Torres, the attorney Diego had recommended. She was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of sharp, no-nonsense demeanor that made me believe she'd handled worse family disasters than mine. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, she said, reviewing the documents I'd brought. Over the past 5 years, you've given your parents approximately $52,000 in what you believed were loans. You have receipts, text messages acknowledging the debt, and bank transfers. But no formal loan agreements. Right. They're family, so I trusted them. And now you've discovered that during the same time period, they've been systematically transferring assets to your sister while planning to exclude you from their estate. My half-sister, I corrected. Who isn't my father's biological child? Margaret made a note. The paternity issue complicates matters, but it might actually work in your favor. If we can prove they've been covering up an affair and using you as a financial resource while planning to disinherit you, we have a case for financial elder abuse in reverse. What does that mean? It means they've been exploiting your emotional attachment to extract money from you. It's a form of financial fraud. She leaned back in her leather chair. The question is, do you want your money back, or do you want justice? I thought about that for a moment. 3 days ago, I would have said I just wanted my family back. Now, I want both. Good. Because you're going to need to be prepared for war. Families like yours don't surrender quietly. She was right. My phone had been buzzing constantly since our confrontation. Valentina had left 19 voicemails, each one escalating from sweet and apologetic to angry and demanding. Dad had texted saying I was destroying your mother's health. Mom had sent a series of messages that started with "let's resolve this like a family" and ended with "you're making a catastrophic mistake." But the most disturbing communication had come that morning. A text from an unknown number: "Drop this immediately or you'll be sorry. Some secrets should stay buried forever." Margaret examined the screenshot with interest. Threatening messages. That's excellent for our case, but concerning for your safety. Do you have somewhere secure you can stay while this unfolds? I nodded. Connor had offered his guest room, despite his wife's obvious reservations. It felt strange accepting help from my ex-boyfriend, but he was the only person who understood the full scope of what I was dealing with. There's something else, I said, pulling out a manila envelope. Diego did some research through public records. The documents inside painted an even more disturbing picture. Valentina's husband Nathan had been named as power of attorney for both my parents' medical and financial decisions. The house had been quietly transferred into a trust with Valentina as the primary beneficiary. Even Mom's catering business, which I'd helped save with an $18,000 loan, was now solely in Valentina's name. This is sophisticated financial planning, Margaret said, impressed despite herself. They've been working on this for years. 18 years, according to Mrs. Chen. The neighbor who witnessed the affair? We'll want her to provide a deposition. Her testimony could be crucial. Margaret made another note. Isabella, I have to ask, are you prepared for the possibility that pursuing this will destroy your relationship with your family permanently? The question hung in the air between us. Was I ready to lose my family completely? Then I thought about 31 years of being treated like a disappointment. Of being used as an emotional dumping ground and financial resource while being systematically excluded from the family I'd been supporting. Of the wedding reception where my own mother called me useless in front of 75 people. They destroyed the relationship a long time ago, I said. I'm just finished pretending it was my fault. Margaret smiled grimly. Then let's begin. The first attack came that afternoon. A certified letter delivered to Connor's house, where I was staying. It was from Nathan's law firm, formally demanding that I cease all harassment and defamatory communications toward their clients. They're terrified, Connor said, reading over my shoulder. People don't hire lawyers this quickly unless they have something major to hide. His wife Rachel brought us coffee and sat down at their dining room table. She'd been surprisingly supportive once Connor explained the situation. I've been thinking about something, she said. If they've been planning this for 18 years, there might be other people they've manipulated. Other family members who've been financially exploited. She was right. Diego had mentioned that our Uncle Carlos had complained about Mom always needing to borrow money for emergencies. And Cousin Sophia had mentioned that her parents had helped pay for Valentina's wedding because Mom and Dad had cash flow problems despite me literally paying for the flowers. We need to talk to the extended family, I said. Find out how many people they've borrowed from while hiding their assets. Connor was already opening his laptop. I still have contacts from my PI days. We can trace their financial history going back 18 years if necessary. Over the next week, a disturbing pattern emerged. My parents had borrowed money from at least 7 different family members over the past decade, always with sob stories about temporary difficulties. Uncle Carlos had loaned them $12,000 for emergency house repairs that never seemed to happen. Sophia's parents had contributed $7,000 for Valentina's wedding while being told my parents couldn't afford their share. Meanwhile, property records showed they'd been steadily transferring assets to protect them from creditors, including family creditors like us. It's a classic long-term con, Margaret explained when I brought her the new information. They identify emotionally vulnerable targets within the family, exploit their desire to help, and then protect themselves legally from having to repay anyone. But why target family? Wouldn't it be easier to scam strangers? Family is perfect for this kind of fraud. You're emotionally invested, less likely to demand formal contracts, and more likely to keep quiet about being victimized because you don't want to damage family relationships. The irony was devastating. I'd been protecting the people who were stealing from me. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later. Connor's PI contact had found something interesting in the financial records, a series of payments from my parents to Dr. Ramirez going back 17 years. Not medical payments, those would have been covered by insurance and paid to his practice. These were personal checks made out to him directly. Blackmail? I asked. Possible. Or payments for his silence about Valentina's paternity. Either way, it proves the affair and shows they've been paying to maintain the secret. Margaret was excited. This is evidence of conscious deception and financial manipulation. But the other shoe was about to drop. That evening, as I sat in Connor and Rachel's living room reviewing legal documents, my phone rang. It was Diego, and he sounded frightened. Isabella, you need to know something. Valentina just called me. What did she want? She wanted to know if you'd hired a lawyer. And she wanted to know where you were staying. Cold terror washed over me. You didn't tell her, did you? Of course not. But Isabella, she didn't sound like herself. She sounded desperate. And she said something strange at the end of the call. What? She said, some people don't understand when to let sleeping dogs lie. I hope Isabella figures that out before it's too late. Connor was already moving toward the window, checking the street. We need to call the police. And tell them what? That my sister made a vague threat. But even as I said it, I was thinking about the anonymous threatening text I'd received. About how quickly they'd hired lawyers. About how much money they stood to lose if the truth came out. My phone buzzed with another text from an unknown number, final warning. Walk away now. This time, there was a photo attached. It was a picture of me taken from across the street as I'd left Margaret's office that afternoon. Someone had been watching me. Connor was already dialing 911. This isn't family drama anymore, Isabella. This is stalking and intimidation. As I sat there waiting for the police to arrive, I realized something that made my blood run.